the shameless daughter-in-law who left her unknown millionaire husband. Welcome to Wise Stories. Please do remember to subscribe, like and share this video. Amara was a 25-year-old woman with dreams far bigger than the small town she lived in. Her marriage to Kelvin had been arranged by their parents, and although she initially agreed to it out of respect for tradition, she couldn't help but feel she had settled. Kelvin was polite and kind, but he was not the type of man who made her heart race. Their life together was simple, a small, tidy house on the outskirts of town, dinners at home, and quiet evenings watching TV. Amara often found herself staring out the window, daydreaming about the glamorous city life she saw online. "This can't be all there is to life," she muttered to herself one evening as she scrolled through her phone, looking at pictures of women her age living in luxurious apartments, wearing designer clothes, and traveling the world. Kelvin, on the other hand, was content with their quiet life. He worked as an engineer for long hours and often came home late, exhausted but still trying to make time for Amara. He rarely talked about his work in detail, brushing off her occasional questions with a simple, "It's nothing exciting, just the usual." This lack of communication only fueled Amara's frustration. One evening, as Kelvin walked through the door after another long day, Amara greeted him with a flat, "You're late again." "I'm sorry, Amara," he replied, dropping his bag by the door. "There was a lot to finish today." "A lot to finish for what?" she snapped. "We're not exactly rolling in money, are we? All this work, and we're still stuck in this boring house." Kelvin sighed, sensing the brewing storm but unsure how to address it. "I'm doing my best, Amara. Things will get better with time." Amara's frustration grew each passing day. Conversations with her friends didn't help, they only made her more dissatisfied with her life. "Girl, you need to leave that small-town life behind," her friend Tasha said over the phone. "You're too smart and beautiful to be wasting your time with a guy who can't even take you on a proper vacation." Amara sighed deeply. "You're right, Tasha. I want more than just cooking, cleaning, and waiting for him to come home." That evening, Amara sat across the dining table from Kelvin, unable to hide her discontent. "Kelvin, don't you ever want more from life?" she asked, breaking the silence. "More? What do you mean?" Kelvin looked up from his plate. "More money, more excitement, more ambition," she exclaimed. "You're always working, but it feels like we're going nowhere. Don't you want to live a life that's bigger than this?" Kelvin paused, his fork hovering midair. "Amara, I thought we were building a life together. It may not be perfect, but I'm working hard for us." "For us? Or just for you?" "Because this isn't the life I want," she said, her voice trembling with anger. The argument reached its peak a few days later. Amara had been silent all day, and Kelvin could feel the tension as he entered the house that evening. She didn't even look at him as he walked in. Finally, as he sat down, she spoke. "Kelvin, I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice firm. "What are you saying, Amara?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "I'm saying I'm leaving," she replied. "I'm going to the city. I need to find something better for myself." Kelvin stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You're leaving, just like that?" "Yes, Kelvin," she said, standing up. "I've tried to make this work, but I can't live like this anymore. You're a good man, but we're too different." Kelvin sat quietly for a moment before replying. "If this is what you feel you need to do, then I won't stop you. But Amara, you don't know everything about me." "What's there to know?" she asked bitterly. "You're an engineer who barely makes enough to get by. What else could there be?" Kelvin opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself. Instead, he nodded slowly. "If that's what you think, then go." The next morning, Amara packed her bags and left without looking back. As the bus pulled away, she felt a strange mix of relief and nervousness. She was finally free to chase her dreams. In her mind, Kelvin was just a small-town man with no ambition, and she deserved better. But as the bus disappeared into the distance, Kelvin stood by the window, watching her go. He pulled out his phone and stared at a message from his assistant. "Boss, the board meeting is scheduled for 3 p.m. Will you make it?" "Yes," he typed back. "I'll be there." As he put the phone down, his face remained calm. Kelvin knew Amara had made a mistake, but he also knew it wasn't his place to force her to stay. The city was everything Amara had imagined: bright lights, tall skyscrapers, and streets bustling with people chasing their dreams. She stepped off the bus, her suitcase in hand and hope in her heart. The air was electric, and she felt a rush of excitement. This was the place where her life would change, where she would become the woman she had always dreamed of being. But reality hit quickly. Amara soon realized that the city didn't care about her dreams. She applied for countless jobs, walking into offices with her best smile and neatly pressed clothes, only to be met with rejection after rejection. Eventually, she found work as a receptionist at a small firm, earning just enough to pay for a shared apartment with peeling paint and noisy neighbors. At night, she lay on her thin mattress scrolling through social media, seeing the same glamorous lives that had inspired her to leave. She whispered to herself, "I'll get there. It's just a matter of time." Amara's friends from the city cheered her on. "You're just starting out," Tasha told her over coffee one day. "Nobody makes it big overnight. Keep pushing." But the grind of city life began to wear her down. Rent was high, her job was monotonous, and the constant noise of the city left her feeling drained. Her carefully curated image of success, nice clothes, manicured nails, and fancy lattes, was costing more than she could afford. One evening, as she stared at her nearly empty bank account, she let out a frustrated sigh. "This isn't the life I wanted," she muttered. "What am I doing wrong?" Her fortunes seemed to change one fateful evening. At a networking event she attended with Tasha, Amara met Charles, a tall, charismatic businessman with a confident smile. Dressed in an expensive suit and holding a glass of champagne, he exuded wealth and power. "You must be new to the city," Charles said, approaching her. "I'd remember a face as stunning as yours." Amara felt her cheeks flush. "I've been here a few months. Still finding my way." "Well, let me show you around," he said with a wink. Over the next few weeks, Charles swept Amara off her feet. He took her to high-end restaurants where the menus didn't have prices, sent her bouquets of roses, and even bought her a designer dress for a gala they attended together. For the first time since arriving in the city, Amara felt like she was living the life she had always dreamed of. At first, everything felt perfect. Charles introduced Amara to high society parties, where she mingled with celebrities and influential people. She marveled at the opulent lifestyles around her: chandeliers, champagne towers, and laughter that seemed to echo endlessly. "You're amazing, Amara," Charles whispered in her ear during one party. "With me, you'll never have to struggle again." For a while, she believed him. She posted pictures of her glamorous new life on social media, and her old friends commented with envy. But beneath the surface, cracks began to show. Charles started making subtle remarks about her appearance. "Why don't you wear something more fitted?" he'd say. "You need to look perfect if you're going to be on my arm." Amara laughed it off at first, but the comments became more frequent. He also began questioning her every move. "Who were you talking to at the party last night?" he asked one evening, his tone sharp. "It was just a friend from work," she replied, confused. "I don't like you getting too close to people I don't know," he said firmly. As the weeks turned into months, Amara realized she was losing herself. Charles controlled every aspect of her life: what she wore, where she went, even who she could talk to. One evening, after yet another argument about her lack of gratitude, Amara sat alone in the lavish apartment Charles had rented for her, staring at the expensive furniture and feeling utterly empty. "This isn't what I wanted," she whispered to herself. "I left Kelvin for this." The next morning, Amara decided to confront Charles. "I can't do this anymore," she said, standing in the middle of the grand living room. Charles raised an eyebrow. "Do what? Live like this? You treat me like a doll, not a person." Charles laughed coldly. You think you'd be here without me? You'd still be stuck in that tiny apartment if it weren't for me. Amara felt her chest tighten. Maybe I would, but at least I'd be free. Meanwhile, Kelvin quietly kept tabs on Amara. Though heartbroken by her departure, he couldn't bring himself to block her from his life completely. He saw the pictures she posted online with Charles and felt a pang of sadness but also resolve. She made her choice, he said to himself one evening, sitting in his sleek office. Kelvin's life had changed drastically since Amara left. His tech company had secured a major deal, and his net worth had doubled. But success felt hollow without someone to share it with. When his assistant asked why he continued to check Amara's social media, Kelvin smiled faintly. Sometimes, you just want to know if the person you cared about is happy, he replied. Amara's dream life with Charles began to crumble one fateful evening. She had been returning from a friend's gathering when she found Charles sitting in his lavish penthouse, deep in conversation with an unfamiliar woman. The moment she entered, the woman quickly left, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. Who was that? Amara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Just business, Charles replied dismissively, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. But something felt off. Over the next few weeks, Amara started noticing more red flags, calls he wouldn't take in front of her, late-night meetings he couldn't explain, and whispers at parties about his reputation. The final blow came when she accidentally saw a message pop up on his phone from another woman. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Confronting him, she asked, how could you do this to me, Charles? I gave up everything to be with you. Charles smirked, unfazed. You're naive if you think I owe you loyalty, Amara. You wanted the good life, didn't you? Well, this is how it works. Heartbroken, Amara packed her things and left that same night. She had no idea where to go. The city she once saw as her escape now felt cold and unwelcoming. Standing in her tiny rented apartment, she stared at the empty walls and thought about how far she had fallen. I thought I was building something here, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. But I've only ended up with nothing. Days turned into weeks, and her savings dwindled. Desperation set in. One morning, as she scrolled through job listings, her eyes landed on an opening at eTech Solutions, a prestigious tech company she had heard about. The position was for an administrative assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her best shot at starting over. When Amara received the email inviting her for an interview, she was ecstatic. She spent hours preparing, making sure her resume was polished and practicing answers to potential questions. The morning of the interview, she wore her best blazer and stood in front of the sleek glass building of eTech Solutions, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. Inside, the receptionist led her to the top floor. As the elevator doors opened, Amara stepped into a grand office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was instructed to wait outside the CEO's office. CEO? She thought, frowning slightly. I thought this was just an assistant position. Why would the CEO be interviewing me? Before she could dwell on it, the door opened, and a familiar voice said, "You can come in." Amara froze. Sitting behind the large oak desk was Kelvin, looking sharp in a tailored suit. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Amara, Kelvin said, his tone professional. Please, have a seat. Her knees felt weak as she slowly walked to the chair. Kelvin. I didn't know, she stammered. That I was the CEO? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, most people are surprised. Amara's mind raced. She wanted to apologize, to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she managed a weak smile and said, "Thank you for considering me for this position." Kelvin nodded, flipping through her resume. Your qualifications are good. And I see you've been in the city for a while now. Yes, she replied softly. It's been an experience. Kelvin looked up, his expression unreadable. Why do you want to work here, Amara? She hesitated, unsure if he was asking as a potential employer or as someone who once knew her deeply. Because I need a fresh start, she said honestly. I want to build something for myself, and I think this company can give me that opportunity. Kelvin leaned back in his chair, studying her. A fresh start, he repeated, almost to himself. Interesting. The silence was unbearable for Amara. Finally, she said, Kelvin, I owe you an apology. For everything. He raised his hand, stopping her. This is a professional setting, Amara. Let's keep it that way. Her heart sank. The warmth and kindness she had once taken for granted were gone, replaced by a guarded demeanor. She realized just how much she had underestimated him, not just his success, but his strength. Kelvin continued, if you're hired, you'll report to one of my managers. Your personal history with me will not affect your role here. Amara nodded, her throat tight. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. As the interview ended, Kelvin stood and offered his hand. Good luck, Amara. We'll let you know our decision soon. She shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. Kelvin, she started, but he was already looking back at his computer screen, signaling that the conversation was over. Walking out of the office, Amara felt a rush of emotions, shame, regret, and a deep sense of loss. The man she had left behind, thinking he was ordinary, had turned out to be extraordinary in every way. She realized now that Kelvin had been the genuine, kind-hearted man she had always wanted. As she stepped onto the street, the city felt colder than ever. She looked up at the towering building behind her and whispered, "What have I done?" Amara received the job offer 2 days later. Despite the relief of having a steady income again, the thought of working under Kelvin filled her with nervous anticipation. She spent her first day quietly observing her new environment, keeping her head down and trying to make a good impression. Kelvin, on the other hand, maintained his professional demeanor. He didn't treat her unfairly, but he also didn't offer any warmth. Amara often saw him in meetings, his confidence and authority undeniable. Watching him command the room, she couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and regret. During a team meeting, Kelvin made a rare comment directly to her. Good work on the client report, Amara. Keep it up. His tone was even, but the acknowledgement sparked a small hope in her heart. Later that week, Amara gathered the courage to approach Kelvin in his office. She knocked softly on the door and waited for his "come in" before stepping inside. Kelvin didn't look up immediately. What is it, Amara? He asked, still typing on his computer. She took a deep breath. I wanted to talk about us. About the past. Kelvin stopped typing, finally looking at her. His expression was calm but guarded. Amara, I don't think this is the time or place. Please, she said, her voice trembling. I need to apologize. I made a mistake, a huge mistake, and I was selfish. I didn't see the man you truly are, and I walked away without giving us a real chance. Kelvin leaned back in his chair, his eyes searching hers. Do you think words can fix everything, Amara? You left when things got hard. You didn't believe in me. Her voice cracked as she replied, I know. And I regret it every single day. But I want to make it right, if you'll let me. Over the following weeks, Amara threw herself into her work. She arrived early, stayed late, and volunteered for challenging tasks. Her determination didn't go unnoticed. Her colleagues began to admire her dedication, and even Kelvin seemed to take note of her efforts. During a team lunch, one of her coworkers said, Amara, you've been amazing lately. How do you keep up this energy? Amara smiled modestly. Just trying to do my best. This company means a lot to me. Kelvin, sitting at the head of the table, glanced at her but didn't say anything. Still, she could feel his silent acknowledgement, which gave her the strength to keep going. One evening, as Amara was preparing to leave, Kelvin walked into the office she shared with her team. Everyone else had left for the day. Amara, can I speak with you? He asked. She nodded nervously, following him to his private office. I've been observing your work, Kelvin began, leaning against his desk. You've been doing well, better than I expected. Thank you, she said softly. But this isn't just about work, is it? He continued, his voice calm but firm. You're trying to make up for what happened between us. Amara hesitated before answering. I know I can't erase the past, Kelvin. But I want to show you that I've changed. That I'm not the person who gave up so easily. He sighed, crossing his arms. You say you've changed, but rebuilding trust isn't easy, Amara. Love isn't just about the good times. It's about loyalty, even when things aren't perfect. Her eyes filled with tears. I understand that now. And I'm willing to work as hard as it takes to prove that to you. As time went on, Amara and Kelvin began having honest conversations, usually after work hours when the office was quiet. Amara shared her struggles in the city and the lessons she had learned. I thought money and status were the keys to happiness, she admitted one evening. But I was wrong. It's the people in your life who matter. Kelvin listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that made her reflect deeper. He also opened up, telling her about his decision to live humbly despite his wealth. I wanted to find someone who would love me for me, he explained. Not for my bank account. Amara nodded, her heart heavy with guilt. And I failed that test. Kelvin didn't reply immediately. Instead, he said, failure doesn't mean the end, Amara. It's what you do after that matters. One Friday evening, Kelvin invited Amara to his office again. This time, there was a softness in his demeanor that she hadn't seen in a long time. I've been thinking a lot about us, he began. About whether we can rebuild what we had, or what we never really got a chance to have. Amara's heart raced. Kelvin, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want the chance to prove myself. He looked at her, his gaze steady. I'm willing to try, but it won't be easy. Trust has to be earned, and it takes time. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. And I'm willing to take it one day at a time, for however long it takes. For the first time in what felt like forever, Kelvin smiled faintly. Then let's start there. One day at a time. As they shook hands, it wasn't just a gesture of agreement, it was a promise. The story ended not with grand declarations of love but with a quiet understanding between two people who had grown and learned from their mistakes. Amara left Kelvin's office that night feeling hopeful, not just about their relationship but about her own ability to grow and change. Kelvin watched her leave, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He wasn't sure where their journey would take them, but for the first time, he was willing to find out.